This episode contains coarse language. Discretion is advised. Welcome back to Tech Society, the podcast delivering candid conversations with smart people, tech and business leaders, academics, and more about their big ideas and how they're changing our world. Now your hosts, Alex Stunmo and John Newen.
Hey there, techies. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Tech Society. Today we are speaking with Sven Ross, founder of Diamond Cyber. Sven is a highly experienced security practitioner with more than 20 years experience across both government and private sectors. Working as the CTO of the 2nd Commando Regiment and in world-leading mining companies, Sven has led technical teams of up to 150 security specialists in high-risk military environments and high-tempo commercial mining operations. In this episode, we get down and dirty in the world of cybersecurity, and it will force you to ask the question, does your organization or business have enough protection? And what exactly does that mean, enough protection?
So my name's Sven Ross. I'm the founder of Diamond Cyber, and I guess what I stand for is good security for the world. My background is military, 18 years in the Australian Army, most of that in Special Operations Command. So yeah, Chief Technology Officer for Commando Regiment. Essentially, you're responsible for everything from single-channel radio to multi-channel radio data networks to the deployable secret networks, top secret networks, and the security across all of that. So, and then when I left the Army, I didn't really know what to do, and I was lucky enough through my discharge process to get introduced to Michael Malone, a previous person in this seat. It's a really standard story. We got drunk together a couple of times and decided we liked each other. The idea for the business was mostly his. He saw the gap in the market for cyber, was kind of looking for people to partner with, and I think because we hit it off, he said, what do you know about this space? And really, luckily for me, it was a sliding doors moment in that, late in my military career, we'd started to push into the cyber realm and really explore, with the Australian Signals Directorate, what role uniform members had, and in particular Special Operations Command and the communications element in it. So we'd been pushing into that space, largely from a defensive posture, but starting to explore how we fit into ASD's now public offensive architecture as well.
If you can answer the question, what's the role that the Army versus, say, ASIO and intelligence?
I mean, it's changed significantly. The military, so defence has stood up, not Cyber Command, that's an American parlance, but Information Warfare Division, headed by General Marcus Thompson. So it's taken a significantly different direction now. When we were exploring it, it was about how does the roles and tasks of Special Operations Command fit with offensive cyber action. So
what was the early days of Diamond Cyber like?
Look, I think you guys would probably be pretty familiar with it. Chaotic and stressful, but in a way that was exciting. I was blissfully ignorant of how difficult it was to start a company and then get a company to succeed, to be sustainable. And I'd like to think if I had known, I still would have gone ahead, but you don't know what you don't know. It was interesting. We were formed with myself and my business partner, Al Heidenreich, Michael, and another investor, Ian. Ian was essentially our first managing director. He was working in the business as well as having invested in it, but pretty quickly his health deteriorated, and sadly he'd contracted Alzheimer's. So he went downhill rapidly, and I guess I was thrust into the breach to start leading us. And look, guys, I got to be honest, I'm surprised that we made it. I had no idea what I was doing.
What was your role like before you took over?
Just like a principal consultant, so out there consulting, making money, pulling in revenue.
So you quickly went from operating in the business to being in a strategic role.
Yeah, correct. Yeah. I mean, but let's be fair, it was a strategic role over 4 people at the time, so it wasn't so much strategic as it was fighting to stay alive every day, which is the nature of a small business.
Yeah, absolutely.
Where cash flow, where's the next job coming? Oh shit, we don't have one. What are we doing about that? I guess the challenge that Al and I faced predominantly was we're not commercial people. So it wasn't managing budgets and things like that. It was how do you win work?
I think even commercial people struggle with that question.
Yeah, for us that was a real challenge. Like we didn't. I grew up here in Perth, but I fled as soon as I was 18 to join the army and seek adventure, and then I came back here. I didn't really know anyone in town, and so we really relied on Michael and Ian's contacts to help us find work. And just, again, as it would happen, right place, right time, right circumstance, one of those contacts worked in BHP.
Yep.
BHP were looking for someone to help them stand up their cyber team for the iron ore asset as it was then and back to being now. And we pitched them, and they liked our snake oil, and which is an absolute. I don't know how to describe it, but it just doesn't happen. BHP does not work with 4-person startups.
No,
ever.
It's pretty unlikely.
Ever.
Well, when they do, they don't realize it. It's
Yeah.
through someone else.
Yeah. That's it. Yeah. So we were just really lucky to have Ian's influence, and then sit there in front of Ricardo Escobar, who was the head of, I guess, the IT arm of Iron Ore at the time. Hyper intelligent man, had an amazing vision, and he was easy to work with. So again, for me, it was I almost fell back into that military role. Like he was he was my colonel, and I was his IT guy, and he'd say, let's explore this. So I'd get on and explore it, and it was really successful. And that we've essentially built the start of the company out of that account. We were able to hire more people, bring more people in.
Did you find because in the military, I guess it was a lot more stable, and you knew what you had to do. Your role was clear.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Did you find, is the life of a small business just pure chaos and unknowns?
It is, and to talk to the first part of the question, yes, absolutely. In the military, everything's structured from a training and job role perspective. You go and do, when you get promoted and go into a new position, typically you go and do a course. If you need to learn a new skill, you go and do a course. Great training architecture, but I guess operationally, it's about being comfortable in the chaos, and particularly in Special Operations Command. When you're training in Australia, everything's set, but once you're deployed overseas and you've got an enemy playing alongside you or opposed to you, you need to be comfortable in that chaos because you don't know what's going on. You've got your plan, but how does your plan interface and interact with the enemy? There's a saying in the military that no plan survives HR. And HR is the start of combat. Or no plan survives first contact with the enemy. So in that respect, we were well drilled in terms of that chaos and just making the best out of what we had.
I guess that applies to business as well in a way.
Yeah, it did. I mean, that's how we survived that period. We just went, well, hang on, we've kind of been in an environment like this before. We have no idea about this new context, but we knew how to succeed in that old environment. We're both alive, so we came out okay on that front. So let's apply that same intelligence-led approach to what we're doing. So we did, and by and large, it worked. And I guess we faced an uphill battle of really coming up against two very established security companies, one of which we're now merged with, which is fantastic, in Asterisk, and they were really the incumbents. They did great work, well known, been around town for a long time, and so really what we had to leverage was that military experience and that slightly different approach to solving cyber problems.
And the resource companies like BHP, they are often the target of nation states for breaking and spying on their operations, right?
Absolutely. I mean, I won't confirm or deny
anything
that occurred because that'd be a breach of some NDA signed somewhere. But yeah, I mean, understanding how nation states posture themselves in geopolitical cyber conflict, it'd be ignorant to think that they're not trying to interfere with the networks of those large companies. I mean, they're of such significant interest to Australia's economy. Yeah, I mean, it's phase zero operations are phase zero operations, and governments do this all the time. So, yeah.
You don't realise because as a civilian, it kind of just happens invisible, but it happens constantly.
Yeah, which is why it was quite amazing that ScoMo stood up in June and
I remember that.
Was so open about it. He didn't name China, but fuck it. For us in the room and everyone listening to the podcast, it's China. He's talking about China, and that's an amazing step, right? Intelligence operations, even counterintelligence operations that the country executes are for very good reasons secret, and people don't need to know, so they're not told. But he stood up but I thought it was a great move, right? He's calling out the bully. China's being a bully, and he's standing up and saying, people are bullying us, we're not going to take it. And I think that's the behaviour you want to see from a leader, not straying into politics.
What do you think the common person doesn't understand about cybersecurity, both on that international front and then from a commercial perspective?
On the international front, I think it would mostly be what we're talking about is that, I guess people suspect that, Russia and China are hacking other companies and other countries, but are they aware that we likely do it as well? Australia made its offensive cyber capability public way back when. Well, not way back when, like 2-3 years ago. Yeah. And I don't think the Americans have. I don't think the British have. But again, would be foolish to think that they don't. So, but I think there's this. Probably the assumption of what countries do versus what they actually do are vastly different things. I once heard someone describe people's attitudes towards intelligence agencies as being some terrible combination of the 50s KGB and Get Smart, right? Who are they? Big Brother watching you with some form of tomfoolery, Marx Brothers thing going on. Yep. The reality is they're mechanisms by which the government protects us. So, they conduct human intelligence operations, they conduct signals intelligence operations, and they conduct cyber intelligence operations. And some of those involve offensive capability, and a lot of those involve defensive capability. So it's just a tool, right? It's just a tool that a government uses. So that's probably the lack of understanding of the general populace with it. It's just something that governments do in order to help protect our national interest.
With that offensive cyber capabilities, do you think that companies are doing that internally, like to other companies, like competition?
We've been asked twice in our history to do it.
Wow! So you have actually been asked?
Yeah.
Wow.
Not by anyone reputable.
Yeah.
And my answer is always the same. Give me island buying money.
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
That's a good way to
do it from another country, from your island in the Pacific Southeast.
Which is of course flippant because I'd never be willing to break the law. But it's interesting to see what people's motivations are. So, and they say, well, what's that price? And I said, well,
wow.
Yeah, now this conversation can finish. It's the type of thing. But yeah, I don't think anyone does it. There's just not enough cyber talent to be frank, right? So BHP does not have offensive cyber operators. It's just not within their remit. Huge companies don't.
Yeah.
Maybe tech companies. Maybe Cannon Brooks is actually some form of James Bond villain and trying to take over the world. I guess smart tech companies have got the technical capability to be able to apply that knowledge to that space, but my firm belief is companies don't do it.
Yeah, I'd be surprised.
Not here in Australia anyway.
Especially when you're making those kind of profits, you don't need that potential backlash.
I guess the return as well. Like, I guess for offensive, it comes after defensive, right? So you start off locking everything down, making sure your cybersecurity defensive capabilities are on point, and then they can start thinking about going to the next step.
But think about in the context of what we've done as business owners and business operators, how hard is it to just survive doing the thing that you do as your core business, let alone investing something which is completely outside your remit? So you guys would be closest to it. Technical teams are very smart software engineers. But imagine being a mid-tier miner and going, I really want to take down that other gold miner. Let's stand up let's get some hackers going. Even just engaging with someone on the dark web, would they know how to do it? No.
They would just lose a few Bitcoin.
Correct. Yeah, exactly. Some scammer go, you beauty.
Speaking of that, what is the best way for a small business to develop a cyber strategy? They don't have a big budget. How do they make sure that at least they're protected from the common attacks and scams you must see?
Just good IT hygiene. Off the top of my head, I say 60% of a good cyber strategy and good cyber defense is just simply having a clean and efficient network that's built to best practice against vendor standards and is well maintained. What is the essential 8 from ASD in their top 4, right? You've got patching applications, patching operating systems, multi-factor authentication. There's only one application whitelisting, which is kind of go out and buy stuff. So the 3 of the top 4 are just do the things that you should do to maintain your network well. So for small businesses, a cyber strategy should be, let's just get good quality IT.
Most of them don't actually do that.
Most of them don't do that. And that's
so
where
it's a good start. Yeah.
So, strategy, go to the cloud, Office 365 or GCP, Google Docs, whatever your flavor is, use a cloud service. Who's best at securing servers, you or Google?
Yeah, absolutely. I give that advice to people all the time.
Yep.
And turn on 2-factor authentication, and you're pretty well protected.
Exactly. And then it's just a little bit of awareness, right? Because if you're a small business, you're unless you work in the defence supply chain where it's significantly different, it's unlikely you're going to be the victim of a targeted attack. It's going to be all commodity malware, broad brush, drive-bys, exactly, things that very basic security controls will defeat.
What's the worst situation you've seen, in a commercial, in a commercial setting?
Oh no!
Yeah, this is it. Can I swear?
Yeah.
This was fucking excellent. So, I won't name the company, but they, when was Petcher and WannaCry? 2017. So, this was after WannaCry and before the not Petcher. Oh no, Petcher was 2018. So it was in early 2018. How do I say this to protect anonymity? A person that we'd had a previous association with was working for another kind of security firm, and they were conducting incident response activity for a medium-sized company, international presence in New Zealand, and they got hit with the not Petcher variant, and the response internally was an absolute clusterfuck. And the response from this other company trying to manage it just made things worse instead of better. There was no containment of the problem, no step to eradicate where it was before they stepped back into recovery. And so what had happened was
it keeps coming back.
The ransomware was sitting on a timer because it had been in the network for probably a week, and then it was self-deploying and propagating at a certain time. And they didn't, and because they'd not done the investigation as to where it had come from and when it had started. Although they just jumped because of no containment, no eradication. They jumped straight into recovery,
restored all the files, and
rolled back,
rolled back, and then it came again, and then they rolled back, and then it came again. And by the time, so we were there for the third restore, and me and the team are going, guys, have we found patient zero? Do we know where it came from? Have we identified anything from first principles? And no, we just want to get back on. And this, honestly, their remediation, I mean, obviously instant response, you get paid good fees. We made a little bit of money out of it. They hit seven figures easily. They got into the millions in terms of their remediation costs because it was just so fucked. Because every time, because they hadn't closed any links, so it was just propagating over their WAN. It was a real nightmare.
Before we continue this podcast, here's a message from our sponsor.
We believe that you can create art and beauty with technology. We think big. We move quietly. We are Ninja Software.
What's your quick advice for companies to avoid malware, like the ransomware malware?
Good backups, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
good backups, or be ready to pay the Bitcoin.
So every company needs to buy some Bitcoin, I think, just in case.
So I guess what you're saying is it's kind of inevitable.
Well, no, I don't believe it's inevitable. I don't believe that. I mean, there are great. If you have the money, you can invest in fantastic tools which will detect and defeat ransomware. It will detect and defeat even, what do they call it? Polymorphic. So when they're
changing their signature.
Changing their signature, recompiling the binary so it has a different hash, right?
Yeah.
It's also culture too, I imagine. Like that story you were saying just then of that company. Did they change the way they approached IT security afterwards?
I believe so.
Did they get you to roll out that kind of equipment? That would no,
they didn't. I mean, we pushed them really hard to all we did was help them with their incident response processes because that's where they fell down. Yeah. It was the classic chickens with no heads. The CIO doesn't know what's going on. His team are running around doing stuff. The executive is shitting themselves because they were a B2C, so they dealt with with consumers. So all their systems were shut down. They had to shut down all of their stores, and they could count the money every day they were shut. And so it was just their response to the incident they hadn't talked it through, they hadn't walked it through, they didn't know what they were going to do, what each level of the response, what their interactions were. And I mean, that's my key advice to more companies. So I should have said, have great backups and practice your incident response. Talk about it. Do your fire drills, right? Everyone does fire drills. Do your cyber fire drill. Just at least talk about it around the executive table and then the IT leadership. And if that executive table is you and your business partner and your IT leadership is you in your spare time, just talk about it. So it's the same is true of a larger business, of a medium business, and of a small business. Because once a procedure not practiced is a procedure not worth the paper it's printed on.
Yep. So how much cyber is enough cyber?
Oh, yeah. I love Dorothy Dix's. It's probably the lead question that I get asked by boards.
Really?
Yeah. How do we know when we're doing enough?
That's a good question.
Yeah, it is a great question, because they've companies who are mature in their approach have been at this for hopefully a number of years now, and they've invested a bunch of money, and they're going, well, how much is enough? We see there's another tranche of funding requested by the IT manager, by the CIO, by the security officer, whatever it is. We want to know how much is enough, and unfortunately, it's a complex question to answer, because there's an element of self-reflection as the company that you need to conduct in examining your own value. What do you perceive as being valuable? First off, why do you do that? Well, that's because what the threat will look for. When you've determined what's valuable in terms of a threat, who's going to come after it? So kind of build your avatar. So same as you build a customer avatar, build your threat avatar and determine what is their motivation, because motivation links to what you do. We're a bank, well, by and large criminals. We're in the defence supply chain, well, quite likely nation states. So that's kind of that process of self-reflection, where you understand what it is that you have is valuable, and then you can start to put a dollar figure against, well, how important is that to me, and how much should I invest to then protect it. There's also a critical component of risk appetite, risk threshold, and that's no different to. And it's funny when I'm asked that question by boards, I'll throw back to them, well, do you have a risk appetite, a risk statement for your legal risk, your compliance risk, your health and safety risk? Oh yeah, we do. So what's stopping you from determining that here? What level of risk are you going to accept? And again, let's get risk nerdy, but ISO 31000 talks about risk transfer, risk reduction, but there's another one, risk acceptance. Risk transfer, risk reduction, risk avoidance, risk acceptance. You can accept risk, and in the cyberspace, it's important for a company to go, well, what don't we want to defend against? And to understand that, you have to go back to that question of who are we, what do we have is valuable, and therefore who do we perceive is going to come after us, right? Because if you have a strong suspicion that you have something so valuable that a nation state could possibly want to target you, then there's your answer, right? You've got to accept not much risk at all, and you need to spend a lot. But
there's probably requirements, right, like set by the government that you're doing X, Y, Z.
From this perspective, it's actually getting easier for boards to have that thought, because the 2020 Cyber Strategy and the new release of SOCI, the Security of Critical Infrastructure Act, is making it very, very plain. I think, reading between the tea leaves, government's had enough, and they're sick of boards ruminating on this, and they're just coming out and saying, here is the minimum standard. They've extended the description of critical infrastructure from it used to be utilities, ports, and airports, I think, but it's now education, finance, defence, space, data, cloud, kind of everything. Everything that's significant in our economic supply chain is now in there, and the government is putting their foot down, and they're saying, right, here are some minimum standards that you must comply with.
So the landscape of cybersecurity has exploded in popularity in the past 5 years.
It feels like to me, it feels kind of outsider. It feels like the last year.
It feels recent. Yeah. But what's the competition like of all the other cybersecurity companies? Do you find that it's too easy for, I don't know, any tech company to just jump onto it and just say, we do cybersecurity? And how do you differentiate yourselves from those kinds of
yes, it is easy. Charlatan. It is easy for them to say that, but it's, scratch the surface. Who works for you? Where have you done that work before? What are your processes? How do you approach these problems? And then there's the big stony silence of, we consider you a firewall. And that's the depth that we see in those charlatans. There is nothing.
There's a gap between IT and cybersecurity.
Correct. IT and IT security are not the same. IT security just uses IT and is and looks at IT, but completely different trades. My pen testers are all quite skilled in Python scripting.
Yeah.
Are we gonna say could we dress ourselves up as a software development house? Yeah, for about 5 seconds. It's a similar thing. We can develop you some stuff. Okay. No, we can't. It's not core business. So we don't see any threat even from large integrators, right?
I think you'd find the large integrators aren't necessarily.
They're even worse at it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I reckon
small agile businesses can pick up something, because cybersecurity, like you said, in the last year has come up so quickly. Just because the large incumbents are already there doesn't mean they know how to deal with cybersecurity effectively.
Yep.
I imagine, yeah.
But I mean, look, that sort of competition from genuinely skilled people is great. I mean, that keeps you fresh, keeps you on your toes. I mean, it means you don't get lazy. You see so many examples in business where companies have hit a certain scale and then they stop innovating, they stop trying to please their clients. That's healthy competition. You know, I'd love, and I do love when small companies pop up. Now that we're a big company, when small companies pop up and they've got really talented people, have got slightly different.
What's your thought on the talent pool of just cybersecurity? Universities have been adding courses recently, and students coming out, and the Perth scene has come up pretty big. We went to WACTF last year, and there were hundreds of people competing. It was really cool to see.
It was actually the biggest hackathon I've been to in WA.
Yeah. It's when we first started it back in, I think it was 2018. It's the third one this year. Yeah, well, I mean, it started tiny. We were out in WA in a tiny little room. We had kind of 50, 60 people, and now we're getting over 150. It's fantastic to see. So, yeah, I mean, it's just become the flavour of the month, so to speak, the flavour of the era in terms of tech skill sets to get into for the youngsters. So that's why I think you see it's exploding. People are getting into it. There's probably the assumption that you can graduate and earn $100,000 straight off the bat. Usual stuff, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure you have devs coming here. I'm really talented. Pay me $100,000. Okay, sunshine.
What's the future like for cybersecurity? Yeah, so 2021.
What's your predictions? Yeah,
it's a great question. Cybersecurity is an arms race. There's people building things to systems, platforms, technology to help people and organisations protect themselves, and then there's a threat group of amazing degrees of different degrees of sophistication, examining what we do, looking at it and looking at ways to compromise it and bypass it.
Yep.
So the future is it's an escalation of technology and capability on both sides. So it's a never-ending game, which is great for people in my business.
Of course, yeah.
Because it's all down to the motivation. So criminals have been around for a very long time. States engaging in geopolitics has been around for a very long time. And cyber is just a new tool that both are using. So the future of cybersecurity from a consultant's perspective is rosy.
The future's pretty bright.
The future's pretty bright. Also from the criminal perspective as well.
Of course.
How do you handle that expectation though when someone engages Diamond Security or Cyber CX? They suddenly think, well, I'm protected. Yeah, 'cause, I mean,
it's like job's finished.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, they are, right? They're as protected as they can be.
Yeah, but it doesn't, I mean, there's no guarantees, right? I mean, that must be something you have to educate people on, that even though you're now helping them do all the best practices, they could still get hit by someone or one of their staff members could do something stupid and, anything could happen.
Absolutely. And to paraphrase my Chief Strategy Officer, Alastair McGibbon, it's not about just protecting yourself. That is thinking of 3 years ago and before that.
Yep.
And maybe even 2 years ago and before that. It's about risk resilience now. You can't just protect yourself. You've got to have an ability to detect what's going on. You've got to have an ability to respond to that incident and then recover from it. So it's that status of assumed breach is I guess the buzzword. Assume that you are going to get breached. Make sure you have an ability to find it. Make sure you have an ability to contain it, and make sure you have an ability to restore your business processes, because it's like any other recurring and quite pervasive risk. It's going to happen at some point. Make sure it's just a small bump in the road. Yeah.
So I guess the analogy is closer to occupational health and safety than it is to crime prevention.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a mix, but yes, there's an inevitability of it. So realize that and put yourself in a position where you reduce the impact significantly.
Yeah. We do have one last question.
All right.
Here
we go.
This is the one that is the
catches everyone.
Yeah.
All right. I've never asked this question, and I won't start now.
Oh, well, you can ask it.
Okay, it's my turn. Okay, this is the first time.
Pressure's on you too.
Oh.
Do you watch MMA and UFC?
Yes. Who doesn't? Do people say no?
No, that's not the question though.
Oh, right.
When they go onto stage, before they jump into the octagon, so they wear their fighting trunks, and they have everything ready. They're all revved up, jumping up and down. But there's music that goes on.
Yeah.
And smoke machines come out, lights go down. That's you. What's your music?
Britney Spears, hit me baby one more time.
Nice.
Nice. That's perfect.
Very
Nice.
good. Thanks, Sven.
Cool.
Cheers, guys. That was fun.
Yeah. You've made it to the end of another episode of Tech Society. I hope Sven suitably scared you and you run back to your organization and make sure that you're protected and you've got backups or Bitcoin. Thanks for listening. Head over to the website, sign up to the newsletter. And on this day in tech history, very appropriately, December 4, 2001, the gonorrhea worm hits the internet. Disguised as a screensaver and spread through an infected user's Microsoft Outlook software, the gonorrhea worm spreads through the internet, as in you're a goner. At a pace second only to the love bug virus that happened the previous year, gonorrhea caused approximately $80 million in damage. Make sure you've got those backups. And that's it for John and I. I hope you have a great virus-free weekend, both real and virtual.